we have reached the end of 2021. Well, not really, but my list is officially finalized, so I'm just gonna go by that. Even though Roddy Ricch is intended to drop, and supposedly Gunna is supposed to drop on Christmas Eve, who knows? But this is my conclusive. This is my finalized top 10 hip hop albums of the year. We have gone through the worst and total utter shit of 2021 when it comes to the top 5 hip hop albums of the year. Worst hip hop albums of the year. Those aren't my top 5. Holy, no. And then we went for our top 10 hip hop songs of the year, which was a lot more positive and a lot more of a brighter side of things when it comes to music. And now we have reached one of my most excited videos that I've made on this channel so far. Top 10 hip hop albums of the year with a lot of dishonorable. What is going on? Honorable mentions. My brain is set to hate things. So we're going to go into the honorable mentions and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to preface one last time. This is strictly my opinion. Don't take it too seriously. I have made some drastic changes to this list as of 20 minutes ago. So you may hate me after this. Please don't unsubscribe, I beg of you. But this is, I feel with the changes I just made, they're much more pertaining to what I've listened to the most this year and what has mattered to me the most when it comes to the content and all of the albums that were released this year. So we're going to jump into the honorable mentions. I'm not going to make these overly descriptive because there's so much we have to go through, but I'm going to just name off a couple subtle things about these albums, and I hope you give them all a listen. I appreciate your time. Let's get into it. So, Westside Gunn, Hitler Wears Hermes, 8, both sides. Very long and very encapsulating album, but it has incredible moments. Westside Gunn does try out a couple new things. We get that vintage kind of Griselda sound when it comes to the production, when it comes to Westside Gunn's delivery. We have amazing features from the likes of 2 Chainz, from Stove God Cooks, from Mac Homie, from Tyler the Creator. It's just a great all-around album, and it's a great end to this series that puts Westside Gunn on the map, and I'm excited to see where he goes from this point. And Vogue Cover was my number 10 song of the hip-hop songs of this year. That's just an incredible song. I cannot get that out of my head. Conway the Machine, La Machina. This album did release quite early on to the year, but I didn't come back to it until very recently. With the albums on this list, I like to have quite a bit of time with them, and there's so much music releasing that you're going to be leaving some albums to the side that you're not going to be listening to as much, even though you know that they're great. There's going to be some albums that are going to pull you in the most, and while Conway's didn't really do that for me, especially around the beginning of the year, the past couple of weeks, I have been going back to this album heavily, and I think Conway brings the best elements of all of the Griselda members, but also being the most viable and most marketable and most kind of accessible artist out of all 3 of them. And La Machina brings incredible examples while also going back to that trademark sound they're very much known for, especially when it comes to Scatterbrain, especially when it comes to SE Gang. Goodness sakes, SE Gang is one of my favorite instrumentals this year. That should have been on my honorable mentions, but Conway the Machine, La Machina. JPEG Mafia, LP. And if you are looking to get into JPEG Mafia, I think this is the best way to get into it. Because if you had a tough time when it came to Veteran and when it came to All My Heroes Are Cornballs, this album, while it does have the general unique quirks that JPEG Mafia has had, I think this album is a lot more opening and a lot more being able to dive into without being kind of scared or standoffish to the release. I think it's an incredible starting point for someone that wants to get into actually very abstract and more experimental hip-hop. LP is a great way to start because it does bring those conventional qualities that hip-hop has, but it has this way of just turning it on a flip side, and JPEG has this incredible way of making it sound unique while sounding very potent and aggressive and just sounding very just eclectic and really interesting. So highly recommend it. Boldy James, The Alchemist, Bo Jackson, really amazing collaboration. I believe they have another collaboration coming out, which I believe is Super Tecmo Bo. If I'm not mistaken, that's going to be coming out very soon. But the chemistry that these two have is just impeccable. Bo Jackson's not Bo Jackson, frig. Boldy James's delivery matches perfectly with The Alchemist. The Alchemist throws in these little bit of wrenches into the plan that allows Boldy to experiment a little more, while alongside The Alchemist expanding more into his production, kind of flexing his muscles, because The Alchemist has been going on for such an incredible minute, and he's still finding ways of making his production sound very unique, but also trying to expand kind of his palette. So if you're looking for some really gritty hip hop, some incredible wordplay, go listen to Bo Jackson. Vic Mensa, I Tape. I have been bumping V-Tape, especially, which came out last year, which is unfortunate, because if V-Tape came out in 2021, I think it would actually crack my top 10 list. But I-Tape and just Vic Mensa in general is having an underrated comeback year that no one is really paying attention to, but I think you should. It has these incredible moments of introspection and contemplation when you think of Millionaires, when you think of Shelter, and it has the incredible bangers as well when you can think of, especially Freedom, which was on my list. It's just, it brings that kind of vintage Kanye sound that kind of showed up a little bit in the latter part, and like the very earlier parts of his career, but he's returning back to the sound, and he's really making a statement. He's really bringing a lot of personal content into it, and I really appreciate it, and it's so addicting to listen to. He's becoming one of my most listened artists of the year so far. Now going into Chester Watson, 1997. This is on my New to You series, and it's a very short listen, but if you want some good like lo-fi kind of hip-hop with this nice little bit of wordplay, and also getting to know a little bit more of Chester Watson, who has released quite a bit of material, but with 1997, we do get a lot more in-depth personality, or kind of more in-depth look into his life and the kind of little quirks that he has, and all the references in this album are great, especially to MF Doom and all this kind of stuff. It's great to see this short little album just be so cohesive, and it sounds really good, and just Chester Watson just brings his A game when it comes to the lyricism. Just a fantastic listen. Sleepy Hollow, Still Sleep. I was a Sleepy Hollow stan for a decent bit when this album dropped. I still am quite surprised of how this album turned out. I was not expecting to like a Sleepy Hollow album, so much so that I bought a t-shirt. And it's just a really nice, smooth listen. Like, it does have the drill sound that we are kind of known for, that we know from Sleepy Hollow, and that kind of camp that's going on. But it has this smooth quality to it, and it has this kind of nice, easy listening kind of feel to it. And while I don't listen to this album as much as I used to, when I did listen, I listened to it probably once or twice a day every time when it came out. So I'm not going to discount it, especially later on this year, so please check it out. Don Toliver, Life of a Don, it has the same kind of qualities that Sleepy Hollow just had. It's just really good, easy listening music. It's more of like if you took Travis Scott's sound and not more like sterilized it, but to make it more kind of friendly sounding, per se. And it just adds up to a really great listen. 5 Times is one of my favorite tracks this year. And it's just a really smooth listen. And I'm very impressed, and I'm very excited to see where Don Toliver is going. He's constantly finding these ways to elevate himself and to make himself sound more clean and sound more kind of grandiose and more like a pop star, which I think he's going to become. G-Eazy, These Things Happen Too. This album did not sell well, but I'm not going to... I still want to give this album praise for the very personal content, the great mixes of bangers, but also the ability of going back to some topics that were discussed on previous albums that were a little bit more about mental health and about where G-Eazy was in his current state. And I appreciate that content. And while I haven't gone back to this album much, I still appreciate for what it is. And I hope G-Eazy keeps going with this, because usually when an album flops this bad like it did, you want to really venture to try something else, and you start to experiment, and you start to do these really questionable things. But I hope it sticks with this sound. I hope we stick with this narrative, this content that we have, because I think when you do listen, it is incredibly potent. Mac Homie, Pray for Haiti. This has kind of the same qualities that Bo Jackson had, where it's just really good quality of production. Mac Homie is a master when it comes to lyricism and wordplay. And Mac Homie has been kind of bubbling up for the past little bit. And I'm happy that he's starting to show himself a little bit more in the industry. And I believe he just put an album out, if I'm not mistaken, it's Balin Cho, which focuses more on his Haitian background, his environment. And If I had more time to dive into that, that could have been on my list. But I have Pray for Haiti on here, which is a good listen. And Youngster Jack Free Run, Horizon, which was on my Spotify Wrapped, was one of my favorite songs of the year. And if you're looking for something that you want to get into more glitch hop, if you're looking to get into a hyper pop kind of sound that isn't overtly aggressive, like you can think of like 100 Gex or something like that, this is a really good listen. It allows for a very ethereal and very kind of transcendent kind of qualities to it. And it's only about 15 minutes long. So if you're looking for something that's really bite-sized, but it does bring this nice atmosphere that is very unique to the genre that it comes from, please give that a listen. It's a really great listen, honestly. And now, we're finally into the top 10. And we're going to start off with Baby Keem, The Melodic Blue. And I've been following Baby Keem for a decent bit. I have been following ever since Die For My Bitch released. And I did go back to Sound of a Bad Habit, which has some amazing moments. You need to go back to Sound of a Bad Habit. But with The Melodic Blue, it brings a lot more of the personal content that a typical debut album should do. It does mix in the typical, like, Baby Keem kind of arrogance and the more kind of, I guess, womanizing and kind of all that stuff like that. It brings all the trademark kind of ad-libs and lyrical gestures that Baby Keem has. But it brings a nice little bit of clarity. It brings a nice little bit of introspection that we don't really see Baby Keem go into, because in his music videos and all that kind of stuff, he seems very elusive. He seems very recluse when it comes to himself, bringing himself out more, showing more of his personal side. And we do get those little bits when it comes to when we talk about Issues. We're talking about 16. We're even talking about Trademark USA. It does bring a lot more of the personal content. Not to mention also, Baby Keem, while maybe this may not be risk-taking to him, it is risk-taking for the trap genre in general, because Baby Keem is such an outlier, especially when you think of tracks like South Africa, when you think of Range Brothers, when you think of Family Ties even. It's just, the risks on this album are very interesting, but they pay off. And it's an incredible listen. I've been listening to it constantly, and I'm glad that it released. So, going to number 9, we have Vince Staples' Self-Titled. And this album is incredibly short. I believe it was about 20 minutes long. But this is the most personal content that Vince Staples has put out. And we have had these little tidbits going throughout of his life, especially when it comes to Summertime '06 as another example. But I think this hits more because it's a lot more forefront with it. It's not kind of hidden into these kind of lyrics or this production. It's very upfront. And the prevailing theme that this album has is just a feeling of paranoia, where you are comfortable, or let's just say it's just like you are comfortable in a place that is incredibly dangerous. While the place that you call home, you may feel safe, the sense of danger, the sense of dread, the sense of possibly dying in the place that you call home is a very interesting conflict, and it's dealt with very well in this. And what I also love about this album too is that it has this vintage and this kind of very oldies time kind of sound to it. It doesn't have that throughout the entire production, but it has that atmosphere. It has the atmosphere of like when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I would go down to the television and I would throw like an old VHS tape on, and if you can remember what a VHS sounds like and how it boots up, and you have like the typical blue screen, all that kind of stuff, but you have like this like sound of like a warble, like the winder is starting up, and you have like this kind of this interesting warbled sound through it. It's like you're watching like this classic like TV show or a classic VHS tape that you had growing up. And it has this kind of sound to the whole album where it sounds very vintage. It sounds very like nostalgic, I guess. It brings me back to those times, and that really pairs well with the personal content that Vince Staples goes with on this album. So if you're looking for a nice, concise listen that allows for that personal content, while I wish there was more content to bite on, it does ring an incredible listen with some incredible production from Kenny Beats, and just some really nice deliveries and nice lyricism from Vince Staples. That's a lot more personal. Brockhampton, Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine. This also is probably their most personal album that has been released. And that is more towards Joba and more towards Kevin. And to Joba in particular, Joba has gone through an incredible amount of just, I can imagine, just grief and stress and just dread. And it takes a lot of bravery, it takes a lot of strength to put all of this very brutal sounding and very hurtful content, not hurtful to others, but just it's very hard to listen to, but it's incredibly relatable, and it just allows you to be so connected with the artist. And I'm really hoping Joba is doing well. And if you don't want to if you don't want to do rapping after this, just please focus on yourself. Like if you're going through a rough time right now, if you're still going through an incredibly rough time, just please seek help. Like, you matter the most. Like, the music is great and all, but you as a person needs to matter the most, and I hope you're getting that. I believe that you are, but I just wanted to put that in there as a mental health person. So, it's just, I appreciate the incredible personal content on this, and even from Kevin as well. And we do get this encapsulation of all the albums that have been released through the time of Brockhampton when you think of the Saturation trilogy, when you think of Iridescence, and even Ginger. There is a lot of the moments that have made Brockhampton so special that is on this album when you think of Buzzcut, when you think of I'll Take You On, when you think of Windows, when you think of Chain On, all these incredible tracks in The Light, Part 1 and Part 2. There is so many incredible moments and just unique moments that Brockhampton has made this incredible sound that just works so well. And it's just a recipe that just brings success every single time. It's just an incredible listen. Go give it a listen if you haven't. The whole Brockhampton discography is kind of legendary, considering that they just kind of blew up in the middle of nowhere. And every single album has brought such incredible moments to music and hip-hop in general. So give it a listen. Now, this is my most controversial listing. And this is the one that I just made about 20 minutes ago. No, not actually, no. This has been something I have been tossing around with myself for a decent bit. And it's number 7. It's Tyler, the Creator, Call Me If You Get Lost. Now, I'm not going to say that this album, because it's so low, it's bad. Please keep in mind that, goodness sakes, please keep in mind that the fact that it's on a top 10 hip-hop albums of the year means it's still an incredible listen. Because it's number 7 on a top 10 hip-hop list does not mean the album is garbage. It's just because, and this is where my kind of personal thing comes into play, I just haven't returned to this album that much, but I still love the album. I love just going back to the hip-hop sounds that, while we've appreciated these experimentations from Tyler, it's great to see just Tyler just be on its really amazing lyrical game and have this incredible production and carrying this atmosphere of globetrotting, of going on a train, and just this feeling of just, it's like Around the World in 80 Days, but like a hip-hop edition. It just brings this atmosphere of just going on an amazing trip with Tyler, the Creator, on that that chalet kind of train that was in the album promo. It's just a great listen, and it brings incredible guest features, and it's just a great listen. I just don't go back to it that much. I think while it's an incredible listen, I don't think it has those grabbing and interesting qualities that Igor and Flower Boy did. And it's just, I don't know. Like, I haven't just really gone back to it that much. It could be also a burnout thing as well, where I listened to it at a time when it came out. I just haven't gone back to it that much. But it's just a really quality listen. And I feel like this whole, spiel that I'm having is just to justify why it's so low. But I'm going to preface again, the album is still incredible. Hot Wind Blows is one of my favorite tracks this year, just for Lil Wayne's feature alone. And the general kind of concept that this album has is a very interesting kind of continuation of Igor and having all of this love triangle going on. Tyler has this great way of putting stories through his albums, and I appreciate the amount of detail that is put into it. it's just, I don't go back to it as much. But I'm still going to preface, the album is great. The album is amazing, and it's on a top 10 list for a reason. Please don't get mad at me that it's number 7. And with number 6, I can finally go back into to feeling validated and feeling really cool about my list. It is DMX with Exodus, and this album sounds incredibly classic sounding. What I mean by that, it sounds like a classic hip hop sound. It sounds like, I have a crate of records right over here. It sounds like you go back to a record that you haven't spun for about a decade or so, and it's a classic hip hop album, and it's got dust on it, and you just blow the dust off, you wipe the record off with like a cloth or whatever, and you just throw it on your classic record player, and it does like this nice little like scratch sound at the beginning. It sounds very vintage, and it sounds like something that would come out in the 80s, or not the 80s, that would come out in like the mid to late 90s, but it has this way of bringing a more modern sound to it. And if you think of Dogs Out, if you think of Money, 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 if you think of That's My Dog, if you're thinking of Bath Salts, it brings this nice collection of this old sounding hip hop that DMX sounds incredible on, and bringing these newer kind of touches that DMX was going in that direction. And this whole album is an incredible example of how you can be very established in the industry, or you can be very older in the industry, but you can always find ways to adapt and overcome. And this album, DMX, while he was like 50 years old, I believe at the time, he sounds incredibly aggressive, especially on Bath Salts. And the trademark kind of thing of sounding like DMX is like barking at you, it's still there. And he's freaking 50. And on Bath Salts, goodness sakes, the delivery and the energy that he brings is fantastic. And this album also has the nice touches of personal moments, especially on the latter half when you think of Call Your Father, and even Skyscrapers as well with Bono. It's a really good collection of songs and a good album. And it was overlooked, and people really didn't like it, and people kind of ragged on it, and I don't understand why. And it's sad to see that DMX is not here to continue on what he was going for, because I think he found his sound. He found a sound that was current, that was modern, that could be pushed forward, and he could have really refined what he had here. And like, this is a good first step, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to see that, which is sad. But what we got is an incredible posthumous album it's probably one of the best posthumous albums to me, like in the past few years. And it's just really executed well, and huge props to Swizz Beatz for executive producing, and a lot of DMX's vision was into this release, so I'm incredibly thankful that this dropped. Now we're into the top 5. D2X, The Color Blue. This is a perfect debut album. It allows us to get a more in-depth look into the artist. It gets us to know what this artist sounds like, what their passions are about, what their personal life is like, and it brings this nice mix of soul samples, and it brings a really good kind of delivery and storytelling. It's just an all-around great listen. D2X is an underrated rapper at this point. He's just bubbling up, and I hope he gets the attention he deserves, because this album from front to back just really sounds like a rapper that is hungry, that is looking to tell something incredibly important, to tell a story, to tell his story, to really try to make a name for himself. And we get a lot of personal content on this thing, talking about his basketball career, talking about his wife, talking about just struggling through a day job. And it's an incredibly relatable listen. If you want to look for something that you can heavily relate to when it comes to just being a 9-to-5 kind of worker, or just kind of all that kind of stuff like that, like I am at the moment, it really strikes home to that. And it's really important to be relatable to your audience. And I think D2X just executes that perfectly well. And we're going to go move on to number 4, which I think both of these artists have similarities, especially D2X really looks up to this artist, I think. And that is J. Cole's The Offseason. And with The Offseason, J. Cole has really been concept driven for the past few years when we think of KOD and when we think of For Your Eyes Only and all these other albums. it's really nice to see sounding like J. Cole wants to go back to the old sound and to sound like much younger than he is, because he has a fire, he has a passion, he has an aggression, and he wants to really bring out his A game when it comes to lyricism, when it comes to delivery, all this kind of stuff. He has modernized himself, and this whole album is it's just pounding, it's introspective, it's very personal when it wants to be. It's incredibly powerful when it needs to be, but it can also be incredibly banging when it wants to be. 95 South, one of the best intros Cole has had in a long time. Amari, which is on my top 10 list of songs. Just this great mix of melodic hip hop and also personal content. My Life with Moray and 21 Savage. Pride is the Devil with Little Baby. And then we get the latter half tracks where you get the Climb Back, where you get Hunger on Hillside, when you get Close. You get basically J. Cole's career just encapsulated into this release without this overhanging conceptual kind of thing to it. While there's the atmosphere, of course, of basketball and all that kind of stuff, it's not a prevailing theme to the point where I find with like J. Cole albums that you cannot take like particular songs or single songs out of that, because otherwise it takes away from the concept of the album. It doesn't really fit when you take it out. I think with this, it's just a generally really good hip hop album, and I'm happy that he has gone back to just making incredibly potent and incredibly great hip hop music that is able to be just thrown on and just being able to ride it out and just enjoy it. So we are now into the top 3. This is where a lot of the changes happened through the past, I guess, like a day or so, but I made these changes about 30 minutes ago. And I think it just strikes more of what I've been listening to the most. So number 3, I have Lil Sims. Sometimes I might be introvert, and I hope I got that acronym right. I hope I got the title right, because I got it wrong one point. But what a surprise release. And I know Lil Sims has been dropping albums for, honestly, it's been a little while. I remember there was reviews of one album in particular that came out, I believe it was in 2015. But what a coming out party this album is. It was blown out. It is grandiose. It's orchestral. It's a beautiful album that has this kind of overlying kind of atmosphere of like a fairy tale or an Alice in Wonderland kind of aesthetic to it. But it allows for Lil Sims to dive into issues with her mental health, but also female empowerment and power dynamics when it comes to male and female. It just allows for this incredible sound, this incredible setting to allow us as the listener to follow Lil Sims and to hang on every single word. With this sound, it allows us to really dive in and to understand what Lil Sims is saying and what she wants to bring to the table when it comes to the content and the type of stuff she wants to talk about. And I think this album is going to age incredibly well. When we're going to look back on the 2020s, I can't believe we're in 2021 already. But when we look back on the 2020s, I think this album is going to age like fine wine, especially with the grandiose and impeccable production that this has. And all the messages that are laced through this album, I think you're going to be finding little bits and pieces every time you listen. You're going to find one new little piece that is going to strike you as you listen through years and years and years. And I can only imagine what this album would sound like on a pressing, because just picturing those horns, those strings, the trumpets, just this massive kind of fairy tale kind of crazy story, I can just imagine it working so well on a pressing. So I need to really think about getting that on a pressing. So that's number 3. Number 2, this was originally my number 1, but I had to make a very subtle change, and that is Luca. Why Look Up, God's in the Mirror. I did a New to You video on this album in particular, and my goodness, this Luca needs to be signed to like Griselda Records or something, because this album, when I found it on Bandcamp, and I didn't really have any expectations for it, the cover just kind of really intrigued me, and goodness sakes, Luca has this incredible amount of lyricism, has incredible beat selection, and it's just a brutal listen. It's gritty, it's disgusting, it's like dirt under your nails disgusting. And it allows for this very vivid and very violent storytelling of just violence and substance abuse and all this kind of stuff, drug dealing, all this kind of stuff is put into this. But on the latter half, especially when I think of The Road to Damascus as one of my tracks, it allows for this kind of more introspective look into a place that is so incredibly violent, so incredibly dangerous, and so just a toxic environment. And just being an individual living through that circumstance and trying to navigate your way to the point where if you make one move, you could possibly be killed. Like, that is something that I will never be able to understand, but I'm glad that this kind of atmosphere, these kind of stories, these kind of perspectives are brought onto this album. And Luca has this incredible way of making it sound so vivid and sound so descriptive that you feel like you're in that position with him as he's telling these stories and discussing these kind of details throughout this album. And the whole album is just amazing. And Luca is under the radar incredibly, and I hope he gets the recognition that he deserves. And I hope that with coming albums, we see a massive kind of following that follows with him, because I think he has the potential to be an amazing artist with an incredible following, and he has another incredible album that he can make. I know he can do it because, goodness sakes, this album is just incredible. I have no words for it. It's pretty much perfect. But in my number one, I contemplated this for like a decent bit for the past couple of weeks, and I decided to make the shift now. My number one is Donda by Kanye West. And you may think it's incohesive, it's bloated, it's too long. And I thought those things too when I was listening to it a decent bit. But the moments on this album are something that no other artist can do. No other artist can make these sounds, make these incredible moments that honestly, like, rap and hip-hop artists have not reached this point of just beauty, of just pure amazing hip-hop that Kanye West does, and especially on this album. When you think of Off the Grid, when you think of Praise God, when you think of Jonah, when you think of Okay Okay, when you think of Keep My Spirit Alive, Believe What I Say, all these amazing tracks, and it encapsulates a lot of Kanye's career, which is very eclectic and it's very sporadic. And this album just has this amazing quality that is just indescribable, but it's just Kanye. And I don't think we would have got this album if not for all the things that he's gone through the past few years. And while those past few years were very tumultuous and they were very probably painful and agonizing and struggling, what came out, and I'm glad to see that Kanye is coming on the other end with this, and I'm glad that we got this album because it allows us to have this amazing connection with Kanye that we have never had before. While we've had these connections with Kanye in a way, especially when it comes to the college dropout and late registration and even graduation, we did have that amazing connection to the artist. I feel like with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and I feel like with The Life of Pablo, I didn't get that connection. While those albums are incredible in their own right, and it's a different sounding Kanye, I am glad to be able to come back to this and to feel that personal connection again. And not to mention with the spiritual and just pure euphoric sound of the production when you think of 24, when you think of Come to Life, when you think of Pure Souls even. There's so many amazing moments on this that just transcend just this incredible feeling of just euphoria and spirituality. And being a Christian myself, I feel that spirit like in the music. And one track in particular is Come to Life. It has become my top 10 Kanye song. I don't even know where it's going to place. I don't think it's going to be number one. But Come to Life is something that is just indescribably beautiful. And I've listened to it a couple times and it makes me cry. And as I was listening to this album a decent bit for the past couple of weeks, I put this song as the swan song or the end credit song to Kanye's career. And I know that Kanye is probably going to be moving on to different ventures at this point. I don't know if we're going to get another album. If we do, it's probably going to be a decent bit of time until we get another one. But this song, the sound of it, the content that is brought forth, it really brings Kanye's career to a close. And 24 and all these amazing kind of mixes of what Jesus King was supposed to bring to the table. But Donda really works on those and it really fleshes them out. And this album has been with me for this whole entire year. If I was to go on Last FM, I believe I've listened to this album about 600 times at this point. It is an incredible listen. And while it may not be perfect, it's something I'm going to be revisiting for probably all of the decade. And it has had the most personal qualities and most personal feeling to me as a person. And that's why I had to move it on to number one on my list. Because while all these other albums did have their very personal feelings, and they are incredible quality releases, and I'm not going to discount them, there is something about Donda that really touches and hits a chord with me as a person and as someone going through the time that I am at this moment. Well, nothing like crazy bad or nothing bad at all, really. It just really, it's like comfort. It's like comfort for a hard time, especially when you consider the pandemic and stuff. I think Donda and the music that Kanye brought forth on this album is just incredibly comforting. Well, not to mention just bringing incredible music, incredible banging moments. There's so many bangers on this. I could go on this album for hours. I could make an in-depth video on this thing just by itself. But it's approaching 40 minutes, and that's just my number one. So that's my top 10 hip-hop albums of the year. And I thank you all for watching. I thank you all for deciding to hit the subscribe button and to follow my content. I really appreciate that. I didn't really have any kind of aspirations for this channel, mostly because, like, where I come from, a lot of people don't listen to hip-hop music. A lot of it's bro country and just very terrible music. But I'm happy that I have this platform and I have the ability to talk to, or to at least put my opinion out there of my favorite music, of my albums, giving some recommendations to people. Music is my passion. Music is something that really means the world to me, and I'm so thankful that I'm able to share that with people. And in particular, as the year concludes, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and also thank you to the NFR podcast channel. I have been on that Discord, I believe, ever since March, maybe as early as maybe May, actually. But I did not expect to go down this path of actually going for it, even though I had the equipment with me with the camera on my phone or whatever. I never would have thought that I could just jump on the camera and just talk about music. And if it wasn't for watching hip-hop YouTubers for the longest time, especially the NFR podcast for this past year, I wouldn't be able to do all this, and I don't think I would have had the capability or the guts or the strength to really do it. So thanks, Luca. Thanks, Ant. Thanks, Nick. Thank you all in the Discord as well. I really appreciate having a place to just talk about music, strictly music, because my environment is a very political area, it's a very toxic place, and to have kind of a safe haven, to just talk about music, to talk about my favorite thing in the world, means the world to me. So I thank you all so much. I thank you all, even if you just come by the channel and just take a view. I even appreciate the people giving me dislikes when dislikes were still a thing. I remember when the Bobby Tarantino 3 review dropped, and I think that review has like 6 likes and 23 dislikes. But I thank everyone for watching, even though if you didn't like the content, even though if you didn't like my opinion, I appreciate you guys just giving me the time to just talk about music. So as I approach the 40-minute mark of this video, thank you all for watching. Please give all these albums a listen. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's talk about this. And I hope you all have an incredible Merry Christmas. I hope you have a great New Year, everybody. Please stay safe. And I'm going to catch you all in the new year. I'm not going to be stopping making content. I want to expand my content. I want to work on some video essays even. I want to really expand my repertoire when it comes to the content on this channel. So this is Sonic Spill. Thank you all for watching, and God bless.